The stars, clear skies above, it's a new world. So go out and find it. Keep on doing all the things you do. Hope in your heart will see you through. It's a new world. So go out and find it. I can tell you things that will break your heart. Don't stay in the shadows, making you start. I can tell you things that will break your heart. Don't stay in the shadows, making you start.
Welcome to this. This is the first webinar in the Ideal webinar series. And as you were coming in, the music that was playing was Brave New World, a song of hope. We commissioned this from two men who live with dementia, Paul and Tommy, who work with Thread CIC in Liverpool. So thank you so much for coming. I'm Dr. Catherine Charlwood and I work with the Ideal Research Programme. Before we get to the toolkit, I just wanted to give a brief overview of our broader research programme. We are the Ideal team, an Alzheimer's Society Centre of Excellence based primarily at the University of Exeter, but we've got lots of researchers and collaborators based all around the UK, and some of whom are pictured here. And since 2014, we've been working with people with mild to moderate dementia and their carers living in the community because we want to understand which things affect the ability to live a good life with dementia. Now, the toolkit comes out of our rapid response COVID-19 work, which was funded by ESRC. And the toolkit combines what we've learned from that sort of broader programme of Ideal alongside those new needs that emerged during the pandemic. How can we do things differently? And what is needed now were guiding questions. And crucially, the toolkit combines research evidence with real life experience of people living with dementia and carers. And you'll be hearing from our VIP guests later on. So in a moment, I'm going to come out of this presentation and instead I'm going to explore an overview of the Living with Dementia Toolkit live on screen before coming to our VIP panel of experts. And they're going to share their views on the toolkit with you. And we'll have a good sort of 20 minutes for Q&A. So welcome to the Living with Dementia Toolkit. It is split into 5 themes, and all of these themes contribute to living a good life with dementia. And that's according both to our research findings and to what people affected by dementia have told us makes a difference. So our themes are stay safe and well, stay connected, stay active, keep a sense of purpose, stay active and stay positive. And you can see these themes running along the top menu as well, and the resources that are contained within them. Now, it's fair to say there's a lot here, and that's because everybody's individual, and we wanted people to be able to choose what interests them from this toolkit. However, too much choice can be fairly tricky. So we also have the "How are you feeling today" button. Now, this allows you an alternative way into the toolkit. This allows you to read some statements and decide which one you feel matches your mood right now. And then you can click through to a resource which we believe fits with that feeling. So given that it's Dementia Action Week and the theme is diagnosis, if your statement was, "I've just been diagnosed, show me something that gives me hope," you could click through and it would take you to the Setting Yourself Goals page, where you would find information about a self-help guide called My Life, My Goals. And this page is all about how people with dementia can not only maintain, but regain skills. So something that is not often spoken about. So a very hopeful resource that you might not be aware of. Just to return to the homepage briefly, the design of the website, the entire look, was co-produced. Our involvement group picked and refined the logo. So this was their choice and their choice of strapline. And when we come to the themes, all of the icons and images were again chosen by the involvement group. They pointed out that the original 5 colours were actually a bit too close to each other and could easily be mistaken. So we diverged the colour palette. I say this to stress the importance of co-production. People with lived experience can tell researchers things that they will miss, that they will not think of without that involvement. Also, it makes the process a lot more fun. I have to say that we had hoots of laughter when the original image for the Stay Active theme inspired an alarmed, "That man's having a heart attack," and "Is that Jeremy Corbyn?" So just a shout out for co-production. And while we're on the topic of co-production, I'm just going to admit somebody else, I should point out that it was the group's idea to have a message for carers that was linked from the homepage. It's very prominently displayed. They wanted to frame the toolkit for carers and to let carers know, quite simply, that you're not alone, something that really needs to be heard and often isn't. And while the toolkit as a whole is for people with dementia and carers, there are some individual resources that aim more at one group or the other. Also through co-production, we also discovered new topics. Risk is something that kept on coming up in our discussions. And we realised that this is a topic very much on the minds of people with dementia and carers, but in quite different ways. Rethinking risk was a resource that we had never planned on creating. But through that co-production process, it became obvious that this is a topic that's very important, but isn't really that discussed or dealt with. And so we wanted to tackle that head on. And so we created this resource purely out of co-production. Now, if we go to the landing page of one of the themes, I'm going to pick Keep a Sense of Purpose. You can see that each one is introduced by somebody with experience of dementia as well as a researcher. So you can kind of pick how you want to be introduced to the theme. There are 5 top tips and then a list of the resources within that theme with sort of little descriptors to help you decide whether you'd like to look at it. Now, as well as the new guide to the Living with Dementia Toolkit that you may have seen advertised on the sidebar, we're also beginning to put in downloadable PDFs. So while the toolkit is, the whole experience of the toolkit is very much as a website because it has the videos on, we're also trying to ensure that everybody has access to this in paper form as well. So now, if you scroll down to the bottom of Keep a Sense of the importance of having things to look forward to, you will find that there is a downloadable PDF so that you could print that off for somebody who would like to read about this but doesn't have access to the internet or isn't confident on the internet. Since it's Dementia Action Week and the theme is diagnosis, I want to show you the new Adjusting to a Diagnosis resource. And on this page, we hear from various people about their own experience of adjusting to that news. So for instance, Mac shares how his perspective changed from one of fear over that sense that there isn't a cure, and that really, really bothered him, through to embracing learning about the condition and sharing that knowledge with others, which is now a huge part of his life. Some of the other people featured on this page are here today, so I'm going to let them share their own stories. But just to say that also we have quite an innovative resource at the bottom here, where it's an excerpt from the performance of a stage play. So it's looking at the scenario of what if you were telling your children about your dementia diagnosis, and it explores how to tell your family, but even more importantly, how to receive that news and which reactions are perhaps more helpful than others. Since you've been kind enough to come today, I'm going to give you a very sneak preview of a resource that I'm technically launching tomorrow. So this is Connecting with Your Culture. And this resource really looks at those cultural nuances within the dementia experience and how staying connected to reminders of your cultural heritage can be really helpful during dementia. So we've got Angela talking about her mother. We worked with Chinese Wellbeing in Liverpool, and they very much did not want to be photographed or filmed. So we worked with them to produce a text resource that they did want to share. And forthcoming in the future, we're going to have a resource specifically around language and heritage and the importance of your first language and retaining a connection to that. So lastly, because I know we have a fair few NHS folks in the audience, I just wanted to point out a couple of things which might be of interest to you, although obviously we hope you see the value of the toolkit as a whole in working with people affected by dementia. Dementia and delirium, as you might guess from the title, shares important information on that condition. But what I want to show you is the Getting the Best Out of GP Appointments page, which we recently revamped. It now contains information specific to remote appointments, which through our COVID interviewing of people with dementia and carers, it became obvious that that's quite a new thing that's come in, but looks set to stay. And so we wanted to give people some specific advice around how to handle that. And we also now have a section from Chinese Wellbeing's Dementia Network to highlight the difficulties of communication in healthcare appointments if your first language isn't English. And they've actually created a prompt sheet which could be printed out and used in healthcare settings. And hopefully I can open this and show it to you. Hopefully that's coming up for you. But they created this, and this came out of some discussions they'd had about what would be really useful to use were you in a kind of clinical setting. So again, we've made that available to help you out. So that was a very brief overview of the toolkit, but now I'm going to stop sharing because we've come to the really interesting part, which is it's time to introduce our VIPs. So, Chris, I'm going to start with you. If I go around and you all just want to say sort of who you are, little introduction. So Chris, if we start with you, please.
Hi, I'm Chris Norris. I live in Ashford in Kent. I was diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia 10 years ago now. I'm an Alzheimer's Society ambassador and a dementia envoy for my trust, my local trust. Yeah, and I've once I got the bug with the help of Keith, I was up and running, and I was out there promoting, activating, and just creating knowledge, and that's so important after a diagnosis.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you very much, Chris. Alison, do you want to come off mute and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Alison. I live in Dundonald, which is a small village in Northern Ireland. Was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2017, and thankfully have been able to get involved in quite a few projects, which have all been extremely worthwhile and sort of give you a purpose, and and hopefully breaks down the stigma of what living with a dementia diagnosis looks like, that people can still very much do, and in being involved in the projects, more importantly, giving newly diagnosed people hope that life still can go on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alison. Monica.
I'm Monica. I live in North Hampshire, and my aunt had Alzheimer's for 10 years, and I was her main carer supporter. And I live in a village, and in the village I was supporting 2 other people as a carer, not living in, but caring for them and dealing with their needs as things progressed in their journey. And I also run a group for our older people in the 2 villages, where we have coffee on the first Thursday of the month, and we do singing for fun on the second Thursday. And in the coffee group, we have up to 40 people, and several of those people do have dementia. So therefore, with the knowledge that I've had with, supporting other people, I'm able to put people in the right direction and sometimes get them to be referred to the doctors for their first appointment as well. So the knowledge I've gained over the years as caring for people, I'm able to help people now if they're starting on that journey with dementia.
Fabulous. Thank you, Monica. And last but by no means least, Keith, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Kathy. Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Oliver, and I, like Chris, live in Kent. I live in Canterbury. and I was diagnosed on New Year's Eve 2010, before which I was a head teacher and also the Canterbury area primary schools advisor. So I was keen, once diagnosed, and retirement was imminent, to try and maintain some of those skills and experiences that I had from my professional life, and maybe to bring some of that perspective into the world of dementia, because there are parallels between education and health and social care. I'm an ambassador for the Alzheimer's Society, and like Chris, I'm a dementia envoy for Kent and Medway, which is a role that we've devised over the last X number of years, which is great to be involved both in the third sector and in the NHS. And as far as our ideal is concerned, I'm delighted that I was invited in 2014 to join the advisory group for the project. And it's been an amazing journey since then, which I've drawn so much from, part of which is the toolkit, as well as maybe contributing a bit towards.
Fabulous, thank you. So we've prepared some questions that that these guys are going to answer. So it's up to you who wants to go first. I'll be keeping my eye out for hands and cards. But so to start off with, Toolkit co-producers, why do you think the Living with Dementia Toolkit should be given to somebody who's just been diagnosed with dementia? Go on, Chris, start us off.
Yeah, you you go in, you get your diagnosis, which is the bad news, and basically you're given your bag full of booklets to read and all the things like that, and really you're not in a place to look at booklets or anything. The difference between being given the booklets and being given this is that this is very proactive. This is, you can go in there straight away, you can have a look, and instead of just reading in black and white, you know, how things have gone with people, you can actually see, you can hear them, you can see that they're not all glum and maudling about the whole thing. They've looked at it. They've in Keith's famous words, as one door closes, another door opens. They've drawn a line in the sand, and they've been able to pick themselves up by the bootlaces and crack on. And that's why this toolkit should be given to absolutely everybody, the access to it, because there's some good stuff out there by the Alzheimer's Society, but by far and away, this is the most knockout thing you will ever be given once you've been given your dementia. Not once you've been given your diagnosis. Oops.
No, that was perfect.
Yeah. I just wanted to backtrack. When I said Keith gave me the bug, I didn't mean gave me dementia, because a lot of people think you can catch it from each other. Well, I don't know why they think that. So yeah, it's a phenomenal resource, and I just wish I'd had it 10 years ago, so I wouldn't have had to trawl around the various places trying to get myself, find out information, because it's all there. Just click in and then sit back, have a cup of coffee, and away you go. Brilliant stuff.
Perfect, thank you, Chris. I'm going to go Keith, then Allison.
Yeah, just to build upon Chris's wise words then, I think one thing that I take from it is it's comprehensive, but it's not overwhelming because of the way it's structured. You know, there's an enormous amount of information in there, but it doesn't overwhelm you. If you were to put that into a book and give it to people at point of diagnosis, it just would never get opened. It would scare people to death. So the way it is structured is really, really user-friendly. I'm not going to use the word dementia-friendly. It's user-friendly. It's friendly to anybody. And what's good for people with dementia is good for anybody. It's empowering. It actually gives people helpful, positive, constructive suggestions, which are based on good experience and good evidence. But it gives you space within that to bring yourself to it. You know, it's not as prescriptive as to say, here's the answer, follow this word for word, and everything will be okay. That's not the aim at all. The aim is, here's some great material, here's some great experience, take it, own it, bring yourself to it, and then you'll do well. You'll get something out of it. And you've then got that sense of hope and positivity, which we all crave. That would be my opening statement, really, on something that is a fabulous resource.
Thank you. That was brilliant. Wow. Alison.
Yeah, no, really, what Chris and Keith both have said, you know, I echo all of that. It's just such a fantastic resource. And like Chris, I just wish I had been given it on diagnosis, you know, because you're given a bag of stuff that you come out, and half of it you don't open and half of it you're not in the right place to open, you know. But I think if you were handed this and told, you know, that it was produced with people with a dementia, you know, with dementia, it instantly becomes more appealing. And I think it not only gives hope to the person with a dementia diagnosis, but there's stuff in there for the carers as well, because their life has changed that day. You know, they have been hit with this news and not quite sure how to deal with it and what they should or shouldn't be doing, or, you know, so it's a resource that I think both, you know, can use equally as well. And the fact that it's set out so clearly in sections, you know, you can go to the section that suits you at that time. You know, it isn't something that you have to read in any particular order. You know, you can go to the bit that's more relevant to you on that day, you know, or within that hour, you know, and then you can go back and look at something else the next day or the day after or the next week, or, you know, it's just such a fantastic resource that it really, I really, really hope it is handed out widely to people, or people are made aware of it when they get a dementia diagnosis.
Thank you.
And
Chris?
like Tufty, it just keeps growing. I mean, when you gave us the spin through at the beginning, then I thought, you know, I thought I knew this resource well, but there's the new bits in there, and that gives me a sense of excitement, because I go, oh, there's something new. I'm going to go and have a look at that. And so I think if you're looking at the balance between you're given the bad news on diagnosis, but you need to be given good news at the same time. You need to be given hope. And you know, if you're gonna break some bad news to somebody, you're meant to fit it in. You know, give a bit of good news, some bad news, and some more good news, if you see what I mean. Rather than just say, well, that's, you know, like that's life, off you go. So yeah, that's.
Monica, I think I saw your hand pop there.
I think it's so important that people read that it was collaborated with people with dementia and carers as well, and then people can realise it's for both people, and there are sections or both sections that they can look at together or they can look at separately. And the other thing is that because, you know, when it's given to them, not for them to feel overpowered, but the information is available at any time they feel they would like to turn to it. Because as people were saying, when you get a diagnosis, you don't want to have everything thrown at you one go. And I also feel that it's important for the healthcare professionals to have a follow-up with people once they're given a diagnosis, and then bring it to their attention and say, by the way, have you looked at the toolkit at all? Because I think sometimes people are quite apprehensive at looking at something. And I think it's very good that other people can look at it, so they realise that people with dementia can go out and about, they can go and live life and go off and do things as well. So I think in many cases, you know, it's so important that the information is there, and plus the fact the information is there 24 hours a day. So if they really feel that, you know, things are very difficult, they might just feel that they want to go and look at the toolkit, and there might just be something on there that might just help them with the difficulties they're finding at that time. Because as we've said through this all the time, the dementia is a journey, and the journey can change, and therefore the toolkit is there, and there's so many resources in them that might just give them the support. I had no support when I was caring for particularly my aunt, so it's just wonderful that there is, you know, things like this available. And great interaction with all of us in producing it and coming up with the result, with the toolkit that you've been, putting forward for us all. I can't think quite the right word. I've had a holiday, so I've forgotten the word.
No worries. Thank you, Monica. Keith, go on.
Yeah, I'd like to build on something which I think was very important that Monica just said around that sort of conversation that should take place after diagnosis with a professional. And I'm bringing to this webinar today some information gained from the Alzheimer's Society annual conference yesterday, where I was asked to speak about what we were doing in Kent by way of appointing 42 dementia coordinators who will pick up a caseload of people with dementia at point of diagnosis and stay with them right the way through to the end of their community journey, be it through end of life or through going into a care home. And I was intrigued to see that a number of other parts of the country are adopting similar roles and similar positions within their post-diagnostic support, though they may call them dementia navigators or dementia coordinators. And they are key people really to get their head around this toolkit and to support their caseload with access to this resource, alongside GPs who are also that point of contact. Now, one wouldn't expect GPs to know the toolkit inside out, but what I would expect them to know is that there is this toolkit and it can be of great help to their patients.
Thank you. I think that's, really important. And I was struck listening to all of you then that you talked a lot about timing and sort of, maybe there's something you want to come back to on the toolkit, or you'll look at this bit when you're ready. And another great example of co-production is when I asked the group, how should we advertise the toolkit? They came up with something I would never have thought of, which was postcard-sized fridge magnets. So we actually have printed 10,000 of these so that you could have this on your fridge and have that reminder of, oh yes, maybe I want to go and have another look at that, or maybe today's the day I'm going to explore that. And again, that they played a blinder. I was not expecting that at all. So I'm going to go with one more question for the group before we open up to some Q&A. So we've talked a lot about this word hope. It's there in the tagline of the toolkit. You've mentioned it in some of what you've said. How do you think the toolkit helps people have hope around dementia? Monica, go for it.
I think it's very positive. A very positive message comes out of it. And I think that's what people want is, yes, to get their diagnosis. People have heard all sorts of other things about dementia. And I think it's so important to promote the fact that there is hope. And in the toolkit, there is so much information in there. And people can look at it, refer to it, and in different situations go back to it. So I think that word of hope, I said again, is so important. And the word I was looking for was, you've masterminded it, Catherine.
Flattery. I like that. We had two hands go up at the same time, so I'm going to go Alison.
Alison was first, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, no, in relation to hope, I think the fact that the resource has been produced with people with dementia at the forefront of it, as well as with carers, that has to give hope, as I say, to both the carer and to the people who have been diagnosed, that there is still something I can do here. There is something that I can be involved in. I'm not being wrote off. I don't have to go and sit in a corner and rock. I can still be involved. I can still use my voice. And as I say, I think all that gives you hope, because when you're given the diagnosis, all hope is gone, really. So to get something like this, I think restores that.
Beautiful. Keith.
Yeah. For me, I think of the word hope in its broadest context and then place it in the setting of this toolkit. For me, hope has to be realistic. If someone tells me something or gives me something or shows me something which is given to me in a positive context, then it has to be realistic what can be achieved from that resource. And this does that. It's got to be constructive. It's got to be authentic and genuine. It's got to be honest. And there's an enormous amount of honesty in this toolkit. It doesn't sugar soap it. It doesn't rose tinted spectacles dementia. It really tells it as it is, but in a way that people can absorb and can take positivity from. And it's compassionate because we care. We care about other people. Everyone who was part of this project was part of this project because we genuinely care and we want to make things better for other people. And one way of doing that is to give people hope. And for me, with those principal words that I hold so dear, that gives me hope, and hopefully it gives other people hope.
Wonderful, thank you. Chris?
Yeah, it does give you hope. And the fact that there's such a diversity of people talking about it, it's not just one or two or three people and you can look at it and go, well, it's all right for them. You see so many different faces and putting their own slant on the ways they found around the difficulties of living with dementia. And there's nothing better than when somebody says to me or anybody else there, I looked at what you do, Chris, and I thought, well, if he can do it, I could jolly well do it. And I don't take that as an insult. I take that as a compliment. And that's what happens within this toolkit. There's such diversity there. And also for the carers as well, because just then they can sit down, they can see that they've got support, they can see ideas coming forward, and they're able to sit down, I think, and support the person that they're caring for in a much better way. And they can guide them in the right direction as well. Well, you know, I saw this last night. You've got to see it. It was so, and so it's, yeah, it just promotes that hope. Without hope, where are we? We're absolutely nowhere. And you know, it isn't the end of your life getting a diagnosis. And although it might feel like that when you're sitting opposite the psychologist or psychiatrist that gives you a diagnosis, you've got to find that it isn't. And this is a really good resource for doing it, because once you click into it, you get hooked. You think, oh, I wonder what the next bit is. Oh, and it's like waiting for the next episode of your favorite program on television and thinking, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. So that gives me, and I'm sure it gives everybody else, hope.
Cathy, can I just say one more thing before you open it up to questions? The other thing that the toolkit does is it teaches us things as well. And, you know, I've had dementia now for 11 years, and we're talking about this being a great resource for people who are newly diagnosed. And it is a great resource for people who are newly diagnosed. But gee, it's a great resource for anybody with dementia and anybody who's caring for someone with dementia, whether you were diagnosed yesterday or 15 or 20 years ago. There's still an enormous amount in there that people can learn and take from this toolkit.
Thank you. Well, there you have it. So I'm going to open the floor to audience Q&A, and you're very, very welcome to come off microphone and say your question aloud, or if you'd rather type it into the chat, it's completely up to you. Good question.
Well, personally, I've been involved in many research projects and produced many pieces of work, and I wouldn't do anything differently, to be honest with you. And that doesn't mean to say it's perfect, because it ain't. Nothing's perfect. But I think it's as perfect or it's as good as it could possibly be. And you know, one example is that the group that helped advise this piece of work and help construct this piece of work and create this piece of work, we met every 2 weeks for 7 months on Zoom. So, you know, we're all a bit zoomed out, but Zoom was a really helpful way of bringing people from Northern Ireland and all parts of England into this project, which probably wouldn't have happened if Zoom wasn't available. So whilst it would have been ideal to meet face to face, that might be one thing that would have been lovely to have done and possibly done differently. I wouldn't have done that because it would have been more difficult to do and wouldn't have been affordable.
I think we've got Chris, then Monica on, or Chris, are you asking a different question?
No, I'm going for that one. Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
And the thing is, it evolved over that period of time. It evolved, it changed, it became better in a lot of in all ways. It got better, and it's still changing. It's still evolving, and because it's an online resource, it is able to keep up with the times. Whereas you print a booklet, and the moment it's been printed, it's out of date. It's still relevant. A lot of it is, but things change, don't they? And so we were able to change it as we were going along. We were, like you mentioned before, about we didn't like the icon, the person having a heart attack. Well, they weren't actually, but it looked like they were, and we didn't like that one. So we were able to change it to make it better, and that's why I think I'm not saying it's the best it can be, because I'm sure it will carry on evolving, and people will give their feedback and therefore it can evolve even more. So it will become a superhuman race. It will.
I don't know about that. Monica, did you want to also respond there?
All I was briefly going to say, it's totally mushroomed over the length of time you've been masterminding it. And there's still new things being added, and people can contact you as well. So, in that way, we can find out if people want to contact you, what they're looking for, or what the other needs may be. But it is constantly just mushrooming out.
I think from my perspective, the fact it was such a time-limited project was quite tricky. That in some ways that was amazing, because it really put the pressure on for us to produce and to make decisions quickly. But I would say that some of the learning I'm taking forward into a further project is around the length of time to build up relationships, because obviously when we first started out, we really were having to rely on networks we all had already established. And so it was really only when we managed to get a 3-month extension that we could reach out and further those. So I'm definitely taking a lot of learning forward from that, would be my answer. I think we've all got a role to play, to be honest. And certainly, the way I would want to try and sell it to GPs, and as you say, those very busy clinicians, is to point out the sheer efficiency of this, that we're not asking them to spend lots of time on the web or coaching somebody through it. It's literally just them knowing www.livingwithdementiatoolkit.org.uk, give that out. Put posters up. We've got digital posters that we can email out and share with you, and we've got some printed materials that we can also share. So it's really like we will do our best to try and share the message. But I think probably as a commissioner, you definitely have the clout to get the message out there, but also maybe to put the message out there that co-production is really important, and that people can live really well with dementia for a long time, and that we should be promoting that. Yeah. If I was to be daring. Chris, have you asked a question in the chat? Did you want me to mention the hard copies? Oh,
yes, I'm off mute now. It's very difficult to shut me up, which is why I'm so yeah, no, I thought it might be worth mentioning the hard copies, but yeah, if you could just talk about that. Going online is the very best way of doing it, because the hard copies will never give you the all those extra happy smiley faces of people talking, really. But if you could explain that, maybe.
Yeah, so I think, Chris has put it perfectly, that the full experience of the toolkit is really to go online, purely because when we first launched it in November, the thing that everybody said was the most sort of hard hitting, that made a difference, that felt new to them, was the videos, was hearing directly from people with dementia and carers. And of course, you know, I've yet to work out the wizardry to transform a video onto a page. But so what we have done is we've put together a guide to the Living with Dementia Toolkit, which is freely downloadable from the webpage, and I'll put the link into the chat in a moment. But we also have some printed copies that we're trying to send out. Now, this is very much an overview of the toolkit as a whole, because as Keith pointed out, if you converted the entire toolkit into paper, it would be a bit of a War and Peace blockbuster that wouldn't be very attractive to read. So it's very much trying to give people a taster of what's in the toolkit so that they would want to explore more. And that's available in English and Welsh currently. And as I say, you can either download it and print it for free yourself, or there are some printed copies. I will put the link into the chat. Oh, or will I? Yes, I will. Thank you for the reminder, Chris. Any other questions that anybody would like to ask? Yeah, okay, no, really interesting. We reached out through various networks. I mean, some were people we already knew and then their contacts. We also went through the Centre for Ethnic Health Research, which is based in Leicester. And we commissioned them to run a focus group for us. And that was really useful because the people who work with them already know and trust them. And so we were kind of going through a mechanism that was a trusted mechanism, because I think, as we all know, there can be a lot of distrust and a lot of concern around, you know, who is this new researcher or new research project, and what is it they sort of want from me, as it were. We also put a call out through one of the NIHR networks, which I now can't remember the name of, but who basically had created a diverse group for, I believe, sort of aging frailty more generally, a research cluster, and just put together a sort of one-pager about what this opportunity was, how much time it would take, what the reimbursement would be, because obviously we're a publicly funded project and it's really important to us that everybody who works on the toolkit is paid for their efforts. You know, this is your time and effort, and that must be recognised. So I think being very upfront about that was helpful. I had a lot of preliminary meetings with group leaders to sort of test out whether they thought I was okay, which again is fair enough. I think people have had bad experiences in the past. Another thing was a big learning point for us was reshaping the way we worked with people. So for instance, Chinese Wellbeing's Dementia Network, you know, I originally went to them and said, oh, the videos work really well and people really like them. And they sort of said to me, no, video, photo, no, not going to work. And so they sort of had to educate me on making my expectations a bit more realistic. And so we then opened up a conversation of, okay, that's, you know, if you would like to be involved in the toolkit, we would love for you to be involved. How can we make that happen? And adopting an approach of what works for you, and then we'll find a way to make that fit. So, I mean, I fully expect that there will be some criticism of how heavily textual the bits from Chinese Wellbeing Dementia Network are, but that's how we could represent their voice. And I think that's so important that we did manage to get there. So yeah, it is a lot of relationship building and trust building. And I think, yeah, we've learned a lot going forwards about how to do this better maybe in the future. Yes, please email us at ideal@exeter.ac.uk for anything else that you might want to follow up with. We're always happy to hear from you. And yes, if we can help you to get this toolkit out there, that's what we're trying to do. So please get in touch. All right. Well, I said we'd end at 5:02, and I'm sure that some people are rushing off to 3 o'clock. Sorry about that. I hope it's at least enjoyable. So thank you so much for coming, and look out for future Ideal events. Take care and have a great rest of Dementia Action Week, everybody.